Talk about cowboy builders. Well, not so much. The term is known, and we can all picture half-finished jobs, leaking roofs, overpriced work. But the building industry is fighting back, naming and shaming cowboy customers. Late payments, no payments, unrealistic expectations, or unfair pay. It seems they can face it all. Tradespeople are now sharing experiences and horror stories to warn colleagues of potential pitfalls. Now, Rico Wojtulewicz is Head of Policy and Market Insight at the National Federation of Builders. Rico, good morning to you.
Good morning, Naga.
I'm already getting texts about this. Really interesting. I've had a Mark Stretford in Manchester saying, "Morning, Naga. When you're subject to funny customers, I'm a bricklayer of 30 years. I've got loads of examples. One that really stands out was a garden wall my mate and I built in Altrincham. We did a great job. It's still there 20 years later. We finished it off in shocking weather, and bricklayers don't do rain. Anyway, when it came time to pay the lady, she deducted money from the bill for cups of tea she'd provided at £1 each. And that was 20 years ago. I'm absolutely serious. Couldn't believe it. I mean, there is an issue, isn't there, here, in terms of respect and expectations. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think the respect is a good word to use. I mean, this country, I think, because of the educational hierarchy, you have a degree, you're deemed a certain quality, and other people perhaps not so much so, is kind of a unique thing in the UK. And it does see that tradespeople are then disrespected. And if you look at the COVID period, we saw some material prices like timber, steel go up by 100%. So when you're giving people a quote and saying, actually, this is the cost now, and they remember maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and they think, well, why are we paying this amount now? It's almost like a disrespect to the expertise. And I think that kind of, there aren't a load and load of bad customers, and there aren't loads and loads of bad builders, but we almost have this snowballing narrative that these groups are out to get us. So when a tradesperson gives you a quote and you think it's too high, some people, not everyone, will go, well, I think you're just ripping us off. When the reality is, it's a really skilled job. You might find loads of extra stuff to do in a property or on a development project that you have to then satisfy to do the first thing. And so the costs go up, and people struggle to understand that, in part, I think, because we don't respect the industry enough.
Yeah, or trust it, as you've alluded to, because people are afraid of being ripped off.
Yeah, and obviously when you're getting work done on a home or any building, it could be one of the most expensive things you've ever funded. So you are going to be more cautious about that. There has been research going out there that 5 million people get a quote, for example, with no intention of following through. 1 million people wanted a discount, citing a bad review or criticising work. 2 million kept money back to reduce the price. So it's not endemic, but it's a real problem. It's a little bit like the farming. It's a decent segue. The industry is really struggling, especially smaller companies, because late payment in particular is a killer to industry. It really is. And we see so many companies go under because of it. Insolvency rates are really high, and construction has the worst late payment issues.
There are rules, aren't there, about being paid within 90 days for small businesses, 90 or 30 days. There are rules, but they're not always kept to.
Yeah, and so you've got two types of clients or customers. You've got people that are getting work done on the property, and then you've got larger organisations, and they're the ones that, if I'm honest, abuse that payment period a bit more. So obviously we had the fall of Carillion. Well, a lot of that was because they were using late payment, and they have agreed terms like, we'll pay you in 90 days or 120 days, and if you want the money earlier, well, you can take 5% off or 10% off, and they were using almost that to balance the books. And obviously if you're a smaller company, you almost have to accept, and it's saw that a lot of directors of businesses maybe just employing 2 or 3 people going without any payment because they had to fund their staff, they had to keep their business going. And I'm going to give a special mention to the builders merchants here, because they know this happens, and so for some organisations they give really good credit, and it means that you don't have to pay for a certain amount of period. And if I'm honest, they're keeping a lot of the construction industry going.
What do you do if you're a customer who has been ripped off before? How do you protect yourself and have a good relationship with your tradesperson, with the tradesperson?
Well, if you're getting somebody in, get a quote, ask them loads of questions. Ask 2 simple questions I would ask is, do I need building control to come and sign these things off? And will you provide me a contract? Now, you don't have to know what building control are or do. You can phone them up and ask them whether that job needs work. But if the builder or the tradesperson goes, oh, no, you don't need it, and just bats it off straight away, well, ask them another question about that, because a lot of work requires building control. I'll give you a really simple example. If you're having a bathroom done and you've got to get that water to flow into the drain, well, if you go to like a main system, you can't just have it flowing straight in. You've got to have a whole system where it goes with the direction of water at the bottom. So there's lots of technical detail that has to be done, and building control will have to sign that off. So, and that's the local authority building control. So actually, a lot of work requires legal sign-off, and that's another problem the industry gets into, because the good companies will always say, well, this is what the charges are. You've got to pay for it in builder control, where the prices have gone up recently, and people look at the quote and they go, well, that's really high. So they get somebody in that says, oh, yeah, I can do it all. But then it doesn't meet building regs, and that gives building industry a bad name, even though the good companies are trying to do the right work.
And there's then also the temptation to not pay VAT and pay cash. And then there are risks on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. Look, companies do take cash, of course they do. But people like to go through the books, especially smaller businesses, because especially if they've got staff, it is important to make sure you've got that paper trail. And if I'm honest, we shouldn't worry about that too much, because the government's doing something called making tax digital, and that is changing the whole process. And actually, as an industry, we need to kind of get on board and actually explain that to a lot of people, because I think it's going to put off older people who always do the right thing. A lot of them will do the right thing anyway, but prefer the cash. And the younger people that are coming into it, and they'll need to kind of digitise to make sure that they're dealing with this issue, because the government is trying to crack down on the small minority that will avoid the tax or VAT or whatever it might be.
Yeah, Peter in Cambridgeshire says, I bet there are more builders wanting cash in hand than there are bad paying customers. Practically every builder I've ever met has wads of £50 notes on the go, so make of that what you will. The theme tune to Only Fools and Horses springs to mind. Well, Peter's obviously had very specific experiences there. But there is that kind of impression, isn't that, of builders at this moment in time?
Yeah, it's a real shame, because the reality is so far from that. Builders really, really love their job. Tradespeople really love their job. And to Peter's comment there, get a quote. If you've got a quote, then even if you get paid by cash, there's a paper trail. And builders are okay with giving you a quote, you know. Another tip I would say for consumers or customers is see if they've got professional indemnity insurance, which means that bad work is covered, not just like the health and safety insurance. Yeah, they get that PII, and that does protect customers a bit more. But a good building company, yes, they're very busy at the moment, in part because so many are going under, so there's few companies to do lots of work, but they should be happy to be asked questions before the job starts. When they're on the job, that's perhaps where the bad customer reputation comes in, because people question their skills. But look, the reputation is unfair, and actually I think in part it's because we've got to kind of separate a lot of really big house builders, perhaps building homes that not everyone enjoys the look of or the quality of. And if you think 99.5% of house builders are smaller companies, that reputation carries, and it's a real shame, because the best in class are never really appreciated. And the worst thing is, government doesn't even recognise them, so we never talk them up. We just try and fix the stuff that the bad people do, rather than learning from the best practitioners. And as your bricklayer described earlier, I can guarantee he really cares about his work. And just as a final point, it is important to have these conversations. We've got 12.5 million homes built to kind of traditional methods, and 16.5 million built before we had building regulations that are national. So one job may require a different skill set on different parts of the renovation. So somebody that really knows the property type and can talk you through that is really important. So have conversations, see if they're part of a trade federation, like ours, and we get very few complaints. And companies are very embarrassed if there is a complaint, because they really care about their work and they win work on reputation.
Rico Wojtulewicz, Head of Policy and Market Insight at the National Federation of Builders. It's been really interesting talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Naga.